We have seen in our study already that the big theme and purpose of the book of Acts shows us that the apostles were given a mission to preach the gospel in Jerusalem, then in the areas around Judea and Samaria, and eventually to the ends of the earth, so that all would hear this saving message of Jesus. Well, at the end of even Matthew, the Gospel according to Matthew, first book of the New Testament, we see that he had originally given them this mission. Look there at Matthew chapter 28 and look at verse 18 there. It says, and this is after his resurrection from the dead, it said, "And Jesus came up and spoke to them, saying, All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to keep all that I commanded you. And behold, I am with you always, even to the end of the age." So make a disciple, make someone who would follow Jesus, baptizing them. That's their entrance into the kingdom. But then, not stopping there, teaching them to observe or keep all that Jesus had commanded them. So we're going to see those instructions as we go throughout the book of Acts. It was put with a different detail in Mark chapter 16, there in verse 15. So again, this is, you can see from verse 14 that this is after that Jesus had risen from the dead. But then we look at verse 15 here, and he said to them, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. He who has believed and has been baptized shall be saved, but he who has disbelieved shall be condemned." And so, again, there's that belief and baptism, entrance into Christ's kingdom. But what is the mission the apostles were given? To go and to preach that gospel to all creation, to make disciples of all the nations, as Matthew puts it. Well, we want to focus on some details of the mission that Jesus gave the apostles, because actually he had talked about it while he was still alive on earth, way back in Matthew chapter 10. If you remember in Matthew chapter 10, maybe you've studied this, he had sent them on an individual mission while he was still with them on earth. And we can see that mission, first of all, when you back up to Matthew chapter 9, verse 37, it says, "Then he said to his disciples, The harvest is plentiful, but the workers or the laborers are few. Therefore pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out workers or laborers into his harvest." And then what does he do? In chapter 10, verse 1, summoning his 12 disciples, Jesus gave them authority over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal every kind of disease and every kind of sickness. And then it goes on to list the names of the disciples in verses 2 through 4. Then we get to verse 5 of chapter 10. And it says, "These 12 Jesus sent out after instructing them, saying, Do not go into the way of the Gentiles, and do not enter any city of the Samaritans, but rather go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." So while he's still on earth, he sends them out on a mission, and he says, don't go to other nations. Don't even go to the Samaritans. Just go to Israel. Now, as we're seeing, after he's risen from the dead and he gives them their mission to preach to all the world, now they're not only going to Israel, they're instructed to go to the other nations. But on this specific mission that he sends them out on earth, he says only go to cities in Israel. And verse 7, "As ye go, preach, saying, The kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons. Freely you received, freely give." And then he gets into specifics like verse 11, "Whatever city or village you enter, inquire who is worthy in it and stay there until you leave. Now as you enter the house, give it your greeting." So I just want us to see that this was a specific mission that the 12 apostles were sent on while Jesus was on earth. And so they're given this miraculous power, just like Jesus had the miraculous power to show that their message is a message which is from Jesus. And so the authority of God has been given to them. Not that it's their authority, not that they have the power themselves to perform these miracles, but God has given them this ability to show people that the message is from God. But anyways, why is it important? Because while this is dealing with the specific mission that Jesus gave the apostles while he was still on earth, you get down to verse 16, and now it's very clear that Jesus is talking about the mission that they will go on after he has risen from the dead. Look there at verse 16. Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. So be shrewd as serpents and innocent as doves. But beware of men, for they will deliver you over to the courts and flog you in their synagogues. And you will even be brought before governors and kings for my sake, as a testimony to them and to the Gentiles. But when they deliver you over, do not worry about how or what you are to say, for it will be given you in that hour what you are to say. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father who speaks in you. And he goes on that even people in their family will betray them, and they will be hated because of Christ's name. But here's the point. He says, in essence, after he's risen from the dead and goes back to heaven, then they're going to be brought before governors and kings, and not just to the Jews, but to the Gentiles. And they have to wait persecution, because they're going to be persecuted for the message of Christ that they will preach. And so here's the point, that the apostles were given a specific mission. They need to preach this message, this saving message of Jesus, to Jerusalem, to Judea and Samaria, and then eventually to the ends of the earth. And they are going to be persecuted for this message. People are going to hate them. People are going to bring them in court, put them on trial. People are going to abuse them physically and verbally and all kinds of things. And so the fact is, the fact that the apostles will go through this suffering in their life, but they're still willing to do it because of the gospel message, because of the truth that they've heard from Jesus, and the fact that they're performing miracles to confirm that message. This shows us that the message that the apostles have given us, which we read about in the book of Acts and in the New Testament, it is a message from God, and we can trust it. They were willing to suffer for it. Not only were they willing to die for it, but they were willing to suffer for that message as well. And so that should tell us that this message is the truth. There's